There's a title this morning. It's The Pathway to Blessing. How do you move from being empty, having nothing, to being incredibly blessed? And I think there's some principles that you and I can learn, can take on board this morning from the life of Ruth. But we're going to be introduced to Boaz. This is kind of where the love story begins, if you like, Boaz and Ruth. And Ruth chapter 2, verse 1 is where we meet Boaz for the first time. It says, "Now there was a wealthy and influential man in Bethlehem named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi's husband, Elimelech." And so we know that he's got great wealth. He's a man of influence. He's also, other characteristics, he's a man of integrity. He's generous. He's caring. He's kind. He's compassionate. So Boaz is a great man for Ruth to marry. In fact, if you've ever been to now I'm not speaking from experience here, but if you've ever been to a Christian singles conference, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but what you'll find is that they often speak from the book of Ruth. And I would say to the single ladies in the room, you got to find your Boaz. Wait for your Boaz. As you're praying, as you're waiting for your life partner, look for someone like Boaz. Don't settle for anything less than that, because of all these characteristics of Boaz. Look for your Boaz. And when we look at his name, it's spelled B-O-A-Z. Let's spell that together. Ready? B-O-A-Z. Now, if you're not careful, still speaking to the singles, you could end up with one of his relatives. You could end up with someone else besides your Boaz. And, he's got lots of relatives, Boaz. And I found this on the internet. Here it is. This is what it says. It says, here's some advice. Ruth waited patiently for her mate Boaz. While you are waiting on your Boaz, don't settle for any of his relatives. Like broke as, poor as, lying as, cheating as, dumb as, drunk as, cheap as. So the list, you can just put AZ on anything, and you've got one of his cousins. Wait for your Boaz. So the point is that Ruth did pretty well ending up with Boaz. He was a man, he was wealthy, he was influential, and he was also a man of integrity, generous, and she ends up marrying this man. So how does this journey from nothing, being empty, to being incredibly blessed, married to Boaz? So we'll have a look at that and see if we can see any principles, anything that you and I can take on board this morning. So we're going to start with Ruth chapter 1, verse 16. This is the verse that Susan focused on last week, Mother's Day. She talked about this moment. This is when Naomi is beginning the journey home. She's beginning to head back to Israel, and she turns to her daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth, and says, you go home. Go back to your family. Stay in your land. It's best that you do that. And so they have this moment. There's a lot of tears, and then Orpah leaves. She goes home. But Ruth, what does Ruth do? She clings to Naomi. Remember that? She clings. She hangs on to Naomi. And as she's hanging on to Naomi, she says these words. She says in chapter 1, verse 16, don't try to make me leave you and go back. She's determined. Hey, don't you dare try and make me leave you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying with you. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Incredible picture of Ruth just letting go of everything she's known, everything that was familiar, everything that was comfortable in a sense that she grew up with, family, friends, culture, traditions, even beliefs. She's walking away from, and she's saying, I'm staying with you, Naomi. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Ruth knew exactly what she wanted. She was determined. She was focused. There was clarity about where she was going, and nothing was going to stop her. No one was going to stand in her way. Nothing was going to change her mind, change her thinking. She had focus. She knew where she was going. And so the first principle, the first thing that you and I can learn or can think about is number one, is your focus will determine your future. Ruth had focus. She knew where she was going. She knew there was clarity about direction, and no one was going to change her mind. Nothing was going to stand in her way. Your focus will determine your future. If you want to know where you're going to be tomorrow, or in 2 years' time, 5 years from today, have a look at what you're focusing on today. What dominates your thinking? What has your attention today will give a good indication of where you're going to be tomorrow, in 2 weeks, in 2 years. Ruth knew where she was going. She had this focus. Her thoughts were pretty clear. These are her thoughts. She said, where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Her dominant thoughts. Craig Rochelle, he puts it this way. Our life is always moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts. Our life is always moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts. So you want to know where you're going? Well, have a look at your thinking, because our thoughts reveal where we're heading. They reveal the direction we're going. It's a good exercise to do. Actually, sit down and have a think. What are the thoughts that keep coming up in my life? The dominant thoughts, because they're going to determine where I'm going in life. Sometimes our thoughts can be a little negative. We can just have these recurring thoughts, and we tell ourselves that we're nobody, we're nothing, we're not going anywhere. Well, if that's our thinking, it's revealing the direction we're moving in. We want to have positive thoughts that say, yes, God has got a plan for my life. It matters that I'm alive. I'm going somewhere. Those thoughts will help us move in the right direction. Every one of us, we're moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts. So I'm asking this morning, what is on the radar for you in your thinking? Because that's going to affect the way you live. Brett, I asked Brett if I could share, and Brett, if Brett hears that you're unwell, there's sickness, what's his first response? He will want to go after healing. He will want to pray. Why? Because in his thinking, for him, is always on the radar. God is a God who heals. God is a God of miracles. God can set people free. And so the moment he hears that you're unwell, he's praying for healing, because it's always in his thinking. It's always on the radar. We're all moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts. What is on the radar for you? Well, here we have this incredible focus for Ruth. She knew what she was about. She knew where she was going. She wasn't a drifter. The danger of not having focus is that we can end up drifting. Going, what do I mean by that? We can end up like, a year goes by, a couple of years, 5 years, and we're still going around the same mountain because we haven't got that focus. I want to say that Ruth was not a drifter. She had clarity. She knew where she was going. She had incredible focus in her life. And so they arrive in this new land for Ruth. Naomi and Ruth, they get there, and all around them, there is incredible blessing. We know that they've come out of a difficult time, but now the hand of God is blessing them in the land. There's this, the harvest is plentiful. The barley harvest has started, and here they are in the land, surrounded by blessing. And the question is, for them is, how do we, surrounded by all this blessing, how do we share in this blessing? Because remember, they arrive empty. They got nothing. They've just got each other. We know they've got somewhere, they're staying somewhere. But that's about it. And so what do they do with all this blessing around them? Do they wait for people to come knocking at the door and just say, look, I want a heap blessing on you today? That's one option. Well, we know from the story that wasn't happening. No one was doing that. And so Ruth has this idea. And she goes to Naomi and says, what about if I go and I glean the fields? Now, we did a bit of that last week, Mother's Day. Remember the game, gleaning the fields? So gleaning the fields, what Ruth was suggesting that she does is go out and follow behind the harvesters, and anything that was missed or left behind, she would go and she would pick it up, and she would take that home, and that would be how she would provide for herself and for her mother-in-law, by gleaning the fields. And Naomi thinks it's a great idea and says, away you go. So away she goes. She begins to follow behind, and she is gleaning the fields. Well, Boaz, he arrives on the scene, and he notices this girl in the field, picking up the bits they've missed, gleaning the fields. And so he says to the foreman, I guess the person who's overseeing things there, what's going on? Who's this girl in the fields? haven't seen her before. What's happening? And his response in that moment is in chapter 2, verse 7. It says this: "She asked me this morning if she could gather grain behind the harvesters. She has been hard at work ever since, except for a few minutes rest in the shelter." She has been hard at work since early in the morning. And in chapter 17, it says she's still going in the evening. And verse 17, it says she's still going in the evening. And so here she is. Ruth is hard at work from early in the morning, still going later in the evening. Ruth is a hard worker. She knew that to share in the blessing that was all around her, she wasn't just going to have it handed to her on a silver platter. She knew that she had to work hard to share in the blessing. So she's working hard. The second principle from the life of Ruth is this: nothing worth having comes easy. Nothing worth having comes easy. Ruth worked hard. It's one thing to be focused. You can have the best dream or the best goals, the best sense of direction, but if you don't add hard work to that, it's just good intentions. You're not going to end up going anywhere. So Ruth went out and she worked hard. The word that is used is the word toil. Toiled. She worked hard. She put in the hard yards. I want to say this: to reach your goals, my goals, to be your best at anything in life is going to take hard work. Don't wait for it to be handed to you. Work hard where you are. Andy Spice, he's in the room this morning. He's operating the screen. Andy Spice, he does a bit of Muay Thai, kickboxing, and I've been to watch a couple of his fights, and he will, and both of them he won actually. He did really well. There's a crowd there and watching, and he won these fights. But if you talk to Andy, he'll tell you the journey towards getting in that ring, winning that fight, was he just didn't kick back, relax, eat KFC, and then hop in the ring and win the fight. He'll tell you the journey of going to the gym, spending hours training, preparing, sparring, and then when others are eating McDonald's and KFC or whatever, he's there. He's just got his bottle of water. He's just drinking water because he knows that he's got to look after his body and he's got to maintain a certain weight to get into that ring. Anything worth having, any goal that you're going after is going to take hard work. And Ruth knew to live in the blessing in the land that she was going to have to put in the hard work. Work hard where you are. Why? Because you never know who could be watching. Boaz notices Ruth working hard. He notices. Another reason to work hard, and don't miss this morning, this is important. Another reason to work hard where you are is because we're all in full-time ministry. Did you know that? Maybe some didn't hear that this morning. The reason to work hard where you are, the moment you get saved, the moment you're born again, salvation, whatever you want to call that moment, where you begin to follow Jesus, from that moment on, you are now in full-time ministry. It's not just the pastors and the youth workers, it's every believer. Everyone who is saved, who's come to Jesus, is in full-time ministry. And so our responsibility is to work hard where we are. Why? Because we're representing him now. We're living for him. Colossians puts it this way. Colossians chapter 3, verse 23. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as if working for the Lord. Isn't that good news? We're in full-time ministry. So we leave this place. We go to whatever we're going to do. We now enter our mission field where we work for him. We represent him. Work hard where you are. The other thing about Ruth, which is interesting, is that she's working hard. She's focused. She knows what she wants. She knows what she's going after. She is working hard, but always with her eye on Naomi. Like as she's working, it's not just about me. It's not just, I'm not just doing this for me, self. It's always thinking of Naomi, which is a challenge for us in Western culture, isn't it? Because, it's all about my job and my career and where I'm going and me and my money and how I'm going to spend it. But Ruth, something we can learn is that as we work hard, who is outside of our, world that we can input into and bring blessing to as a result of the hard work we're doing. So Ruth has focus, she has clarity, she's a hard worker, and she gets noticed by Boaz. And in the land of Israel, where they are in Bethlehem, Naomi becomes a bit of a life coach for Ruth. So because it's all new for Ruth, it's a new land, she doesn't understand all the way of life there, but Naomi is experienced. She's lived there, she understands the way of life, and so she begins to coach Ruth in the land, give her direction, give her advice, help her out. Because the reality is, you can be Ruth could be the most focused person on the planet. She can have the best dreams and the most well-defined sense of where she's going. She can be the hardest worker, but without Naomi, she is in trouble. She needed Naomi in the land. Naomi was like a coach, especially when, so this picture of her clinging to Naomi. Wherever Naomi went, she was there. And so especially in the area of Boaz, Naomi begins to coach, begins to give her advice, helps her out with what she should be doing. And this is her response. This is Ruth's response to the advice, the coaching she was getting, if you like, from Naomi. In chapter 3, verse 5 and 6, it says, "I will do everything you say," Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor. She did everything her mother-in-law had told her to do. See, here's the reality, is this. For every one of us, it does matter who we spend our time with. It does matter who we cling to, who we allow to be our coaches, our life coaches, because the people we spend time with will be influencing us, will be taking us somewhere. So it does matter who we cling to. The people we cling to can take us into blessing, into better places. If we've got goals, they can lead us into those goals. And this is the principle here is, and this is the third principle. So what do we got so far? Our focus will determine our future. Nothing worth having comes easy. Third one is who we cling to will affect the height we rise to. And so for Ruth to end up living in the blessing, she had to cling to Naomi. And you think about this across all areas of life. Who you cling to is going to affect the height you rise to. If there's anyone in the room who wants to be an All Black, if you aspire to be an All Black or a great rugby player, well, what do? You look around for someone who's already living in that place, who's already an All Black or been there, and you cling on to them. You allow them to speak into your life, to give advice, to give direction, to coach you. If you want to one day be as, I was going to say, if you want to be like one of the music teams, say you want to be like Noah on the drums or Tony on the drums, what do? You chase them. You cling on to them. Say, hey, I want to be a good drummer. Cling to the people, because who we cling to will affect the height we rise to. It's across the business world. If you're thinking in the business world, you want to have a good business, you want to, that's your goal, that's your dream. Well, look around for people who are already living there, who are already doing it or have done it, and you cling on to them. People will pull us. Look for people who are going to pull you in the right direction. Spiritually, it's a big deal too. And as followers of Christ, if we want to go deeper in our faith, if we want to become more like Jesus, what do? We look around for people who are already living it, there's a sense of the presence of God. The way Jesus lived shows up in their life. Well, I'm going to chase them. I'm going to spend time with them. Allow them to coach me in the ways of the kingdom. Who we cling to will affect the height we rise to. So Ruth clings to Naomi, and she ends up marrying Boaz and living in the blessing, this incredible sense of blessing that we heard about earlier on in the scripture reading. There's one thing that, one of the phrases that Ruth shares in her list of, remember she had this focus, she's saying, where you stay, I'll stay, where you go, I'll go. Your people will be my people. And that makes sense. But then she says this thing, she says, your God will be my God. And for me, that's like almost crossing a line, isn't it? Because she's saying, okay, whatever level of faith she had, whatever level of commitment or spiritual commitment to her God she had in her land, she was now willing to walk away from that and embrace this new God, the God of Israel. And, it's like, how does that happen? And we talked a bit about this at Life Group, and we felt that this would have been a gradual thing. It wasn't like all of a sudden she's just going to throw all that away. She's been with Naomi for a number of years, and she's talked to Naomi about her God. She's learned about the God of Israel, and now she's ready to have a relationship, to put her faith in this God herself. I thought, man, what a testimony for Naomi. That, man, there is something about your God, the God of Israel, that shows up in your life, that I want that God to be my God now. The God that you follow, I want your God to be my God because of what I've heard about your God. And I thought, wouldn't that be an incredible testimony for you and I? Imagine someone coming up to you and say, hey, look, there's something of the way you live, your lifestyle, the joy that you carry, the way you work. I want your God. Whatever God you're following, I want that God to be my God because of the way he shows up in your life. Imagine if people started coming to SAJ. They say, oh man, I've just got to get to SAJ. I've got to get to the Salvation Army in Johnsonville because I've heard something about their God, the God that is alive. He's a living God and he shows up in this place. I've got to get there because I want that God to be my God. Or people chasing you say, man, I just got to have something of what you carry in God. I want your God to be my God. I want to know this God. And I'm thinking this morning, just as we finish and wind up this morning, thinking about that for you in your place of work, place of study, wherever you find yourself, is to see God working through you, in you and through you in such a way that people would say, man, I want your God to be my God. I think that's the most powerful testimony. That would be like presence evangelism. You don't really need to say much. God just shows up by the way you live your life. So we're saying about Ruth this morning, 3 things, 3 principles as we would want to live in blessing, want to move to that place, is our focus will determine our future. Our life is always moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts. Yeah? So if you're thinking, well, what can I do out of this message today? I'd encourage you to go home and sit down and think about what are my dominating thoughts? What are the things that keep coming up in my thinking? Because that's going to give you a bit of a revelation of where you're heading. Focus will determine your future. Second thing, nothing worth having comes easy. Work hard where you are. Work hard where you are. You never know who could be watching. We're all in full-time ministry. We're all in full-time ministry. So work hard where you are. Give your best for God. And thirdly, who we cling to will affect the height we rise to. And I was just thinking in a spiritual sense. I talked about all of life, but really in your life right now, who are your spiritual coaches? Who are the people you cling to? You say, man, there's something of God in you. I've got to spend time with you because I want that, something of what you carry to rub off on me. And already as you're hearing that, there's some of you, you've got names of people. And maybe it's time to reconnect with those people again. Say, hey, can I spend some time with you? Can you be a mentor or a coach for me in my faith journey?